Taiban, New Mexico, out here in the Badlands. Look at this old abandoned church.
The early morning was upon us. By the dawn's early light, we rolled out of bed in Hereford, Texas, and headed southwest to Taiban, New Mexico. At Clovis, we made a right on Route 60 and headed due west another hour or so through Tobacco County, New Mexico, with one destination: the legendary, the forgotten, the hard clay and dry sand of Taiban, New Mexico was the X on our treasure map. Now, if you're just flying by 80 miles an hour, looking at your phone, you might think that that landscape out there stretches on infinitely. But if you take a closer look, you'll see the skeletal remains of a town built on big dreams, big hands, and tough Americans. That is Taiban. Long before it was a town, this patch of high plains was a vital watering hole. And in fact, just a few miles from here at Taiban Springs, the legendary outlaw Billy the Kid watered his horse before his ultimate capture by Pat Garrett in December of 1880. But Taiban's official story began in 1906. The same familiar tale you've heard from me time and time again. The Santa Fe Railroad laid the tracks, and the town was born. Now you're probably scratching your head and going, but Scott, there's no water out there. It's drier than the surface of the sun. Well, it is today. The story of water in Taiban is a bit of a mirage. It exists, but it doesn't look or flow the way it did when Billy the Kid or those early homesteaders were there. Taiban Creek still geographically exists, and it winds its way south of the town ruins down towards the Pecos River. However, today it is a classic intermittent stream, which means it's a creek that only flows during certain times.
Taiban, New Mexico, out here in the Badlands. Look at this old abandoned church.
For most of the year, the creek bed looks completely dry, sandy, and baked in the sun. But during the late summer monsoons or after a heavy thunderstorm, the creek can transform overnight into a rushing, muddy torrent of flash flood water. Now, the historic Taiban Springs, which were reliable surface pools that made the area famous in the 1800s and made life here possible in the early 1900s, are a thing of the past. Over the last century, intensive modern ranching, regional irrigation, tapping into the underground aquifers, and long-term climate shifts have severely lowered the local water table. I mean, you can see that there's nothing there. But because the water table dropped, the natural pressure that used to push that water up to the surface to create the bubbling year-round springs has also dried up. The local ranchers in Taiban rely on deep-drilled wells to tap into the subterranean water to keep their livestock hydrated. These people must have to be digging down 10,000 feet to get water out here, though. And if you follow the dry bed of Taiban Creek about 20 miles south toward Fort Sumner, it eventually empties into the Pecos River. And any time of the year I've been out there, that Pecos River is pumping. That brown, gross-looking water is flowing.
Look at this place. We're about an hour and a half west of Clovis, I guess. This is the most desolate place I've ever been to. There's nothing out here. Look at that.
But this church right here, the Taiban Presbyterian Church, is the crown jewel of Taiban's ruins and one of the most famous photographed landmarks in all of New Mexico. It is the soul of Taiban now, just like it was 100 years ago. It cost exactly $250 to build, but the poor congregation could barely scratch together $100. To finish it, they had to take out loans from the local bank, and interestingly, from the women of the local Baptist church. And it was completed just days before Christmas on December 22nd, 1908. Right from its birth, the church was at war for the soul of Taiban. At the exact same time the church was being built, a massive local controversy erupted over the construction of the Pink Pony Saloon, which featured a snake den in the basement, cockfights, and plenty of alcohol. For decades, the church and the saloons fought a bitter culture tug of war. Some years the church successfully rallied to vote the town dry, and other years the saloon crowd won out and voted it wet. Unfortunately, the church held its very last official service in 1936. The Dust Bowl and the Great Depression finally forced the majority of the town's families to pick up and abandon their farms. While the dry New Mexico air kept the wood from rotting, the building unfortunately couldn't escape human interference. In 1960, the church's bell tower and historic bell were completely removed and sold off. The bell eventually found a home at the Billy the Kid Museum in nearby Fort Sumner. The church's baby grand was also sold. In the 1990s, the interior brick chimney that used to vent the old wood-burning heating stove was removed, and in 2006, heavy vandalism struck the church, destroying 7 of the original double-hung windows and doors. I'm pretty sure what we're standing in here is the backyard of an old house that collapsed long ago. The peak population of Taiban was 400 residents once, and it reached that in 1909.
The old abandoned Presbyterian church.
Homesteaders flocked here because they were convinced they can make a fortune dry farming the plains and shipping out livestock.
What do you got there?
Dry farming is an agricultural technique that produces crops without artificial irrigation. It relies on natural precipitation stored in the soil. Farmers maximize this moisture through strategic tilling, wide plant spacing, and drought-tolerant seed selection, which allows crops to thrive entirely on residual groundwater, which maybe at the beginning it had some of that, but the high plains are an unforgiving partner. The soil, which promised so much, suffered from brutal drought after brutal drought. The dry farming collapsed, and the economic foundation of the town fractured with it. Bit by bit, the population began to shrink.
Do you think it's ever rained out here?
The first Presbyterian church, built in 1908, closed its doors permanently in 1936. The post office, which opened during the 1906 boom, finally shut down in the late 20th century. And Taiban's population plummeted from hundreds of active homesteaders
I don't know if I would spray paint a scary old abandoned church
to a mere handful of resilient desert dwellers. Today, Taiban is often classified as a classic New Mexican ghost town. The recent census data says there are still 57 people here. There are no shops, no banks, no main streets. Just a scattering of mobile homes and historic ruins. Yet Taiban refuses to disappear entirely. Thanks to New Mexico's arid climate and low humidity, structures like that church have been beautifully preserved by time rather than destroyed by it. It stands as a haunting, beautiful monument, tombstone, to the pioneer spirit. A reminder of a time when the railroad brought the world to the desert, and a small community dared to build a future on those vast, open American plains. A thing no human had accomplished before, and no one has since. Alright, we are off to Fort Sumner. Vio con Dios, baby.
Okay, I haven't done this in a long time. I hope you're digging these videos. I love the Southwest. These places are crazy as hell and weird. I just had a new book published. It is called Rainbow Road. It is 130 pages. It's $10.99 on Amazon. It's poems that have won awards, have gotten me flown out to places, that got me a book deal. All about my travels in bands and doing poetry tours in the backseat of cars, okay? And they're all about the Southwest. I have poems about the Santa Fe Trail. I have poems about Amarillo. I have poems about Hereford, Texas. If you dig these videos and you dig my narration commentary, you will love this book. I promise. Okay? Brand new poems, $10.99. It'll be linked in the bio thing in the bottom. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to annoy you probably till like September and then I'll stop talking about it. But check it out. I promise you, even if you don't like poetry, these poems are cool. They don't rhyme. They rock. Thank you.